Hello everyone. We're hearing the obvious rumble of a bad wheel bearing on the front of my 2009 Subaru Outback.
Coasting in neutral.
Going downhill in neutral with the engine idling makes it easier to hear.
Drive. Coasting in neutral. Drive.
As I crest this hill and go into neutral, remember what this sounds like.
Coasting.
We'll compare this to the new wheel bearings I'm about to install. I also have new brake backer plates and McPherson struts to install during the same repair job. So let's get started. I used a dull utility knife to get under the edge of the hubcaps just to get them started. This allowed me to get a small screwdriver under the edge and pop them out.
This is a 32mm socket for the axle nut. If you don't have a 32mm and you happen to have a 1 1/4 inch socket, that works just as well. I have the brake set. Well, you can see I loosened it up before I lifted it because otherwise, what's going to hold it? Now I'll loosen the other side. I think this side is the one that has the bad wheel bearing.
I'm feeling for any play or chucking in the bearing, both side to side and top to bottom.
I don't feel anything bad in there.
That sound could be just the brake pads rubbing the rotor. But we'll see later how it might have also been bearing noise.
So before I pop this rotor off, I'm going to check it with a level. This one's magnetized. And I can see that that's half a bubble off. So I can't use this to do the alignment to adjust the camber. Camber is the tire tipping this way. So I can't use this to adjust the camber, but when I reassemble everything, I can use this to put it back approximately where it was, and then I'll be close. When I set it down on the ground and actually measure it, it'll be close to where it should be.
So the caliper mounting bracket is here, and it's secured to the back of the steering knuckle with a bolt here and a bolt here. So after I remove those two bolts that secure the caliper bracket to the back of the steering knuckle, I want to be able to slide the caliper off, shoes and all, off the disc rotor. And right now it's pretty snug on there, so if there were a ridge here, it would get stuck. So I'm going to use this big pair of channel locks to just put a bit of a squeeze on there and on there. These are the pins, the slide pins that the caliper slides on. So I'm just squeezing that in. There's two pistons, top and bottom. So I'm just squeezing them in a little bit, trying to see if I can get some free play in the slide here, which I got. See that? That's all it takes. That's like less than 1/8 of an inch, but that's all you need. Now these caliper bracket bolt heads back here are 17 millimeter. And you know, I can try just loosening them by hand, but the odds are against it. They're usually rusted in there pretty good. Yeah, got it. Okay. Not so bad on that one. If I couldn't break it loose by hand, I don't like to do it, but I would use a hammer on it. I would go ahead and use a hammer, and done that many times. It damages your wrench a little bit, but sometimes that's the only way you can get it. Let me try the bottom one now. Yeah. And there's the first one. And there is space to get a ratcheting wrench in on both of those. The brake line from the caliper goes to a mount here that's attached to the side of the strut, and that's a 12 millimeter. I want to be very careful with this, not to damage the hose. Just a little tap. There is a steel ferrule on the back of this, so that's what I tapped on. And I'll put that bolt back where I got it from for now, just so I don't lose track of where it came from. So I put a piece of twine on here because I'm going to hang the caliper from this brake line mount. Came right off easy. These Subaru rotors all have this these threaded holes in them, so you can use a pair of jacking screws to pop the rotor off. They take a 13 millimeter socket. I guess I had that one all the way in.
just pops right out. The wheel position sensor here is held in with a bolt that has a 10mm hex head. And it's very rusty, but came right out, and the threads deeper down aren't rusty at all. Now this wire for the wheel position sensor is pretty rubbery. And the sensor itself is in a soft plastic housing. So I just grab it gently with a pair of pliers and kind of twist it back and forth just a little bit until it loosens up. There, you can see it better now. Jiggle it a little, back and forth a little, side to side a little. It'll loosen up and then you can pull it out very easily. Just have to be a little gentle with it. It's just soft plastic and I don't want to damage it. And there it is. So this wheel position sensor is secured to a bracket here on the side of the strut, the front side of the strut. And this is a 12mm socket. And this needs to be held out of the way so it doesn't get damaged. I'll just try to hang it up in here. That should be good. Okay, I'm going to try to get this cotter pin out of here without destroying it. There's a castle nut here on top of the tie rod end ball joint. And it has a cotter pin through it to hold it, or to prevent it from coming loose. Not that it ever could. It's so rusty. Trying to straighten it out as best as I can. The opposite side of this, I'm actually going to flatten it out with a punch. A little penetrating oil here. And I'll just let that soak in for a while before I do anything else. Moving a little bit. Oops, broke that little bit off.
just squashing. Well, this worked perfectly on the other side. It's not working on this side. I can see through there now. Okay, I screwed that crown nut on upside down here until it's about flush with the end of this stud here, the top of the stud. I'm going to use this brass drift to drive it out. There it is. It's amazing how easy that is. The other side was also easy. Okay, this is the top of the strut. There's a bearing here at the top, and there's 3 studs with nuts on them that hold the top in. This is a 12mm socket. I just dropped one, that's okay. There's 2 of them on top here that are going to keep it from dropping through. Going to get these 2 bolts. It's a 19mm socket on this side and a 19mm box on that side. This bolt has an eccentric, like a cam inside it. You can see how this moves. This is how the camber is adjusted here. See that? You see this moving in and out? These 2 bolts are completely out. So the strut is pretty much free to fall out here. Except that I left 2 nuts on the top there. Now I'm going to go take those 2 nuts out of the top and drop this out. Years ago, I had to replace the ball joint bolt with a through bolt and nut because the hole was stripped out. It shows a lot better in this shot. This is 14 millimeter, the socket. This ball joint boss is squeezed tight on the ball joint. So I'm going to try to spread it out by wedging a chisel in here. Basically, I'm spreading a pinch boss. And that worked. See, it lifted right off. It's possible that noise was coming from this CV joint, but I don't think so. And I gotta say, this is smooth and there's no grit in it. I think this is fine. I think we found our problem here. Listen to this. Sounds like a dry bearing to me. That's putting it mildly. It's worse than just dry. The bearing surfaces and rollers have severely degraded. It's just a matter of a short time before this causes mechanical damage to the surrounding related components. Let's listen to this a little bit amplified to really hear what's happening to the bearing. That's a bad bearing. So I coated these threads with Never Sees off camera. Just going to do the whole shaft on that bolt. This is called a ball joint bolt. And it's the bolt that tightens up the pinch boss around the ball joint. I'm also going to coat the inside of this ball joint socket with Never Sees. Never Sees on everything, I say. Oh yeah. The bolt goes in after the boss is over the joint. It's not quite all the way down there yet. It's in there now. .14 millimeter. Just snug. That's enough for now. Get it right in that cotter pin hole. $19mm. I'll tighten it up later. You guessed it, I'm putting never sees on these studs that hold the top bearing up in the shock tower, the strut tower. So the trick now is to get these 3 studs lined up in the holes up here. Got them all started. $13mm. And by the way, the old struts had this seal on the top to protect the bearing. Just to keep crud out, I guess, and maybe liquid, but mainly crud. $19 on the back side here, $19 here. Maybe you can see this moving more clearly now. Never sees, of course. That's 12mm. Now I'll set this up out of the way. I'm going to rehang this caliper temporarily. That's just so I can get this bolt on the brake line up here. Brand new cotter pin. I'm gonna put it in sideways. Because it's very long. I'm just going to wrap it around. But since I have a brand new knuckle, I have a brand new ball joint bolt. This is kind of a pinch boss that squeezes on the outside of the ball joint to hold it tight. This is a 14mm bolt head. These ball joint bolts get 36.9, so round it up to 37. Just torque it. $36.9 foot-pounds. I coated everything with Never Sees. I put the bolts in from behind. This is the new backer plate or dust plate, whatever you want to call it. Backer. That goes on there. Then the new bearing hub goes right in there. This one up here on this side seems to be easier than the others to get at. So I'll start with that one. Okay. This axle can't be tightened in yet. I have to be able to push it back to be able to get to these heads. The bolt heads on the rest of these bolts. I'm doing this one over here now, top right as I face it, top rear of the car. There we go. Just snugged in.
Same problem on the other side with this one. I had to work it in a bit with an open-end wrench before there was enough space to get a socket on it. And right now I'm wishing I hadn't tightened this down yet, because it's in the way. There it is. Snug. Snug.
This shot from the passenger side shows where the wheel bearing hub bolt heads are located. These are the two forward bolts. The two rearward bolts are behind the CV joint in this picture. This shot also shows where I loosened, unscrewed, and put Never-Seez on the tie rod end and its jam nut. I did the same on both sides.
Okay, let me just use my regular ratchet to snug these down, or hand tighten them anyway. They're going to need to be torqued with a torque wrench. I'll just tighten them best I can this way first. Now I can put this wheel speed sensor, wheel position sensor in. It just drops down into its hole. I want to make sure I don't cross thread that. I think I did at first. Okay, everything's ready to be torqued down. The bearing hub bolts get 48 foot-pounds of torque.
Notice how I push the axle back with my thumb. This makes space in back to get the socket wrench onto the bolt heads.
Now, if we remember, I used a level to kind of gauge where the camber was originally, so I could set it to that same point when I assembled it. So that's what I'm doing now. And I had about half a bubble off, which is right there.
Yeah, that's going to be close. So I coated the inside of the rotor there after cleaning it off with a wire wheel. Just so next time it's on there, it won't be stuck so hard. And part of the purpose of cleaning it off really well is that I don't want the crud that's under there to affect the camber adjustment. I like to stack some washers on a couple of the lugs just because it makes it easier to put the brake caliper on when the rotor's not wiggling around. That's it, now it's not going anywhere. So I cleaned this hub mating surface on the inside of the rim with a wire wheel just to make sure it mates flatly and fits properly.
After I put the wheels back on, torqued the lug nuts, and torqued the axle nuts, it was time for a short test drive. Note that the job isn't done yet, because I haven't checked the front end alignment, and that I have not torqued the camber adjusting bolts yet. They're only hand tightened at this point. These must be done before I consider the car ready for my family to use. This is just a short run down the road to listen to the difference the two wheel bearings make. The car is so much quieter and smoother.
Doing 50 miles an hour here. As I crest the hill, I'm going to go to neutral and let the engine idle. Remember how loud it was here before?
Coasting.
Remember how loud it was here before? All that noise from one bad wheel bearing. The other one might have been a little iffy, but it was definitely that one on the driver's side, as I suspected.
Thank you for watching. Next, I'll be doing a DIY front end alignment. My methods are different from all the other shade tree mechanics I've seen. You might find it interesting. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.
Just hit 45. I'm going to go to neutral. I can't believe how much smoother and quieter this is. It's awesome. Should have done this job a long time ago.